The gleaming orbital platform of Draenus Prime Embassy rotated silently against the backdrop of stars, its metallic scales refracting the light of 12 nearby suns. Inside, the air smelled of cinnamon and ash, a scent that had come to signal impending doom for countless civilizations across the galaxy. Humanity's delegation shuffled nervously through the grand atrium, their breaths shallow and quick. This was it, the final diplomatic summit after decades of failed missions, Earth's last chance. "We're completely screwed," whispered Marjorie Clipwad, chief negotiator for Earth's United Continents, dabbing perspiration from her forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief. Her elaborate diplomatic regalia, designed by Earth's finest xenosociologists to impress the Draconis hierarchy, felt suddenly ridiculous. The Montavian Republic lasted 6 minutes in this chamber before they were reduced to interplanetary dust. The Pelgaran Collective didn't even make it past the airlock. Security Chief Tarlok Jex, a veteran of 3 interspecies wars, checked his stunner for the 40th time, a useless gesture, as weapons were ceremonially deactivated upon entry to the embassy. "Stop catastrophizing, Clipwad. The dragons haven't actually eaten a diplomat in at least 70 years. "Oh, that's comforting," Marjorie hissed. "They've only incinerated them." Dr. Eliza Matsuo, Earth's leading xenobiologist, fumbled with her data tablet. "According to my latest analysis, we have approximately a 2.4% chance of survival. I've run the simulations 1,000 times, and in nearly every scenario, Earth becomes either a mining colony or a resort destination for dragon younglings to practice their fusion breath." The grand entry portal to the throne chamber loomed ahead, its massive doors carved from what appeared to be a single piece of obsidian. Embedded in the surface were the remnants of previous diplomatic failures, melted insignias, half-vaporized flags, the occasional preserved diplomat's badge, all encased within the glossy black material, like ancient insects in amber. "Where the hell is our actual diplomat?" Marjorie whispered frantically, scrolling through her contact list. "Ambassador Quan was supposed to lead this delegation. He spent 15 years practicing the draconian greeting hisses." "Radiation poisoning," muttered Gex. "Hit him during the approach. He's in quarantine on the medical deck." "What?" Marjorie's voice rose to a near shriek before she managed to control it. "Who's the backup?" "There isn't one," Dr. Matsuo said, her face ashen. "No one else has the required linguistic training. We're going to have to wing it." "Wing it?" Marjorie clutched her chest. "With dragons? Are you insane? We need someone who at least understands reptilian psychology, or we're all—" A commotion at the rear of the delegation interrupted her panic. The crowd of diplomats, scientists, and military advisors parted reluctantly, revealing a thin teenage girl in a worn plaid shirt and dirt-stained jeans. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore scuffed work boots that left small clumps of what appeared to be Nebraska soil on the immaculate embassy floor. "Sorry I'm late," said Cassidy Chen, looking around with wide eyes at the gleaming chamber. "The shuttle pilot got lost twice, and then security almost didn't let me in because I forgot my ID. Also, I think I might have stepped in dragon poop on the way here. Is that a thing? Do space dragons poop?" Marjorie stared at the girl in horror. "Who are you? And how did you get past security?" "I'm Cassidy Chen." The girl extended a hand smudged with what might have been reptile feed. "From Nebraska? Dr. Matsuo called me yesterday. Said you needed someone who knows how to handle reptiles." All eyes turned to Dr. Matsuo, who looked simultaneously guilty and desperate. "She's the backup plan," Matsuo said quietly. "When I realized Ambassador Quan might not make it, I had to find an alternative. Cassidy here is something of a prodigy when it comes to reptilian behavior. She's been rehabilitating aggressive monitor lizards and crocodilians since she was 9. "You brought a child to a dragon summit?" Marjorie's voice was dangerously calm. "I'm 17, actually," Cassidy corrected, fidgeting with a frayed thread on her sleeve. "And I've never met a dragon before, but I figure they can't be that different from the Komodo dragon I rehabilitated last summer. That guy was nasty. Took off 3 of my fingers." She held up her left hand, where indeed 2 fingers and part of a third were missing. "Got him reattached, though. Modern medicine, right?" Before anyone could respond, a low vibration rumbled through the embassy floor. The obsidian doors began to part with a sound like continental plates shifting. Beyond them lay darkness, punctuated only by the gleam of enormous, jewel-like eyes. "It's time," said Gex grimly. "Wait, wait," Cassidy said, suddenly alarmed. "Aren't you going to brief me? What am I supposed to do in there? What's the protocol? Do they shake hands? Or is it more of a bow situation? Should I make eye contact? Or is that considered a challenge? Do they understand English? Or should I try hissing?" "Too late for that now," Matsuo murmured, pushing a small communicator into Cassidy's palm. "Just follow your instincts, and try not to die. Humanity is counting on you." "Great. No pressure or anything," Cassidy muttered. The delegation began to move forward, led reluctantly by Marjorie, whose practiced diplomatic smile looked more like a grimace of pain. As they approached the threshold, Cassidy fidgeted with her communicator, accidentally activating its holographic function. Immediately, a 3-dimensional image of her appeared above the device, a photo Matsuo had evidently downloaded from Cassidy's social media. In it, Cassidy was grinning broadly, arms wrapped around an enormous crocodile, with text superimposed across the bottom. "Don't be scared, big lizard. I just want to hug you." "Oh shit, turn that off," Gex hissed. Cassidy fumbled with the device, but instead of deactivating it, she somehow triggered its broadcast function. The image instantly hijacked every communications feed in the embassy, projecting across countless screens and holographic displays throughout the station. The message, "Don't be scared, big lizard. I just want to hug you," now echoed through every chamber, corridor, and communication channel of Draenus Prime. "We're dead," Marjorie whispered, closing her eyes as if awaiting execution. They entered the throne chamber. The vast space seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating the disorienting impression that they were walking into a void. As their eyes adjusted, the delegation could make out massive columns rising into darkness, each one carved to resemble intertwined dragon forms. The air was significantly hotter here, heavy with unfamiliar spices and the distinct smell of brimstone. At the far end of the chamber, elevated on a dais of what appeared to be compressed star matter, sat the Draconis hierarchy. 7 massive dragons arranged in a semicircle, their scales shifting colors like oil on water. The smallest was the size of an earth elephant. The largest, positioned centrally, could have swallowed a passenger shuttle whole. Their wings were folded against their bodies, occasional twitches sending ripples of iridescence across the membrane-like surfaces. Eyes like superheated gemstones, rubies, amethysts, emeralds, observed the humans with ancient, calculating intelligence. The central dragon, Crown Prince Vexilahar, according to the briefing materials Cassidy hadn't had time to read, uncoiled slightly, his massive tail scraping against the floor with a sound like metal on stone. When he spoke, the words weren't heard so much as felt, vibrating through the humans' bodies. "Earth sends children to negotiate its surrender?" The dragon's voice carried notes of both amusement and contempt. "Perhaps you misunderstood the terms of this summit." Marjorie stepped forward, her diplomatic training overcoming her terror. "Esteemed Crown Prince Vexilahar, honored members of the Draconis hierarchy, we bring greetings from Earth and—" "Was it your intention to mock us with your transmission?" interrupted a smaller dragon to the right, its scales pulsing an angry crimson. "Your broadcast speaks of hugging. Explain this insult." All eyes turned to Cassidy, who stood frozen in place, staring up at the enormous creatures with an expression that cycled rapidly between terror, awe, and something that looked disturbingly like professional assessment. "That was, an accident," she said, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Sorry about that. Technology. Am I right? Always glitching at the worst moment." The dragons exchanged glances, communicating in a series of subtle eye movements and scale flickers that the human delegation couldn't begin to interpret. "Approach, young human," commanded Vexilahar. "Let us examine this accident more closely." Marjorie grabbed Cassidy's arm. "Don't," she whispered. "That's not part of the protocol. You're supposed to remain with the delegation until formal introductions are complete." Cassidy looked at the terrified diplomat, then back at the dragons. She gently removed Marjorie's hand from her arm. "I think I'd better do what they say," she whispered back. "Also, protocol doesn't seem to be working great for humanity so far." Before anyone could stop her, Cassidy stepped forward, walking directly toward the dais. The delegation held its collective breath. Security Chief Jex's hand moved instinctively to where his weapon would have been, had it not been deactivated. As Cassidy approached, the dragons' massive heads lowered, bringing their jewel-like eyes to her level. Their nostrils flared, taking in her scent, Nebraska soil, reptile feed, and the faintest trace of fear, quickly being overcome by curiosity. "You work with scaled creatures on your world?" asked Vexilahar, his massive nostrils flaring. "Yes, sir. Or, Your Highness? Your scaliness?" Cassidy stumbled over the proper form of address. "I rehabilitate reptiles, mostly ones that humans have messed up somehow, taken from their habitats, kept as inappropriate pets, that kind of thing." "Humans keep scaled beings as pets?" asked another dragon, this one with midnight blue scales and eyes like sapphires. "How primitive." "Well, they're not exactly pets," Cassidy explained, warming to her subject. "More like, I help them remember how to be themselves again. A lot of reptiles get aggressive when they're scared or confused. Humans see the aggression and think monster. But really, they're just saying, 'I'm terrified and don't know what to do.'" The dragons exchanged another series of meaningful glances. "And you hug these creatures?" Vexilahar's tone made it clear he found the concept bizarre. "Sometimes, when they're ready for it. It's more about establishing trust, really, showing them that not all contact is threatening." While she spoke, Cassidy's eyes had been carefully scanning the dragons' bodies, noting the patterns of their scales, the positioning of their wings, the subtle twitching of muscle beneath armored hide. Her gaze lingered particularly on a spot just behind Vexilahar's jaw, a small patch where the scales formed a swirling pattern, like a fingerprint. The dragon noticed her scrutiny and tensed. "What are you looking at, human child?" "Your nuzzle point," Cassidy said without thinking. "At least, that's what I'd call it on an earth reptile. It's a sensory cluster, usually extra sensitive. Earth reptiles use them to bond with their own kind, but they get stressed when the spots are touched by those they don't trust." A ripple of what could only be described as shock passed through the assembled dragons. Several reared back slightly. Vexilahar's enormous pupils contracted to slits. "You presume much, Earthchild," he rumbled, a faint glow beginning to emanate from between his massive teeth. "The knowledge of a dragon's sensitive regions is not freely given to prey species." Behind her, Cassidy could hear the delegation's collective intake of breath. She was acutely aware that she had just committed some form of terrible faux pas, possibly even revealed that she knew something humans weren't supposed to know. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to be rude, it's just, I noticed things about reptiles. It's kind of my whole deal." The glow between Vexilahar's teeth intensified. Dr. Matsuo had once explained that dragon fusion breath began as a molecular reaction at the back of their throats, building exponentially until released. From the increasing brightness, Cassidy estimated she had perhaps 30 seconds before the Crown Prince reduced her to atoms. The logical response would have been to retreat, to apologize again, to defer to diplomatic protocol. Instead, Cassidy Chen did what 17 years of handling frightened, aggressive reptiles had taught her to do when faced with a defensive display. She stepped forward. "You're scared," she said softly, looking directly into Vexilahir's enormous eyes. "I get it. Humans are weird and unpredictable and probably pretty gross from your perspective. But I promise I'm not here to hurt you. None of us are." The glow in the dragon's mouth faltered slightly. Around him, the other dragons shifted, their scales rippling in patterns of confusion and alarm. "Scared? I am Crown Prince Vexilahir, 7th of the Eternal Flame, conqueror of the 9 spiral galaxies. I do not experience fear, especially not of meat-soft prey creatures, barely out of their evolutionary infancy." "Everyone experiences fear," Cassidy said, taking another step closer. "Even apex predators. Maybe especially apex predators. Because you have the most to lose. Status, territory, control." She was directly below him now, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his massive body. The delegation watched in horror, certain they were about to witness her incineration. Security Chief Jex had closed his eyes, unable to watch. Marjorie was frantically reviewing emergency evacuation procedures in her head. Dr. Matsuo, however, was recording everything, her scientific curiosity temporarily overriding her survival instinct. "May I?" Cassidy asked, raising her hand slowly toward Vexilahir's jaw. The dragon's massive head lowered further, bringing his face level with hers. His pupils remained contracted to threatening slits, but the glow between his teeth had dimmed somewhat. "If you attempt to harm me, child of Earth, your entire species will pay the price." "I know," Cassidy said simply, "but that's not why I'm here." With a gentleness born from years of handling frightened creatures, 1,000 times more deadly than they appeared. Cassidy placed her palm against the swirling pattern of scales just behind Vexilahir's jaw, the dragon's nuzzle point. For one terrible moment, nothing happened. The chamber was silent except for the sound of the delegation's panicked breathing. Then, from deep within the Crown Prince's massive chest, came a sound that no human had ever heard before, a sound that, according to all available Draconis research, had never been recorded in the presence of any non-dragon species. Prince Vexilahir, 7th of the Eternal Flame, conqueror of the 9 spiral galaxies, began to purr. The vibration started low, almost subsonic, before rising to an audible rumble that resonated throughout the chamber. The other dragons reacted with visible shock, their scales flashing in patterns of disbelief and alarm. Several rose partially on their haunches, wings unfurling in confusion. "What is happening?" demanded the sapphire-eyed dragon. "Vexilahir, have you been bewitched?" But the Crown Prince seemed momentarily incapable of speech. His enormous eyes had half closed, the threatening slits of his pupils expanding into softer ovals. The glow between his teeth had completely subsided, replaced by what looked disturbingly like a reptilian smile. "It's okay," Cassidy said, maintaining gentle contact with the nuzzle point. "It's just trust. Feels nice, doesn't it?" Vexilahir's purr deepened in response. Across the galaxy, the effects were immediate and profound. On the embassy's public feeds, billions of beings watched in real time as humanity's teenage representative soothed the most feared conqueror in 12 star systems into a state of visible contentment. Betting pools that had placed humanity's survival odds at less than 3% scrambled to recalculate. Xenobiologists frantically recorded and analyzed, their understanding of draconian physiology and psychology rewriting itself by the second. In the delegation, reactions varied from stunned disbelief to cautious hope. Marjorie Clipwad had stopped breathing entirely. Dr. Matsuo was furiously taking notes, her eyes wide with scientific excitement. Security Chief Gex simply stared, his decades of military experience offering no framework for what he was witnessing. "I believe," Vexillahur finally said, his voice considerably warmer than before, "that we may have misunderstood one another, humans of Earth." "That happens a lot between different species," Cassidy agreed, finally withdrawing her hand, "especially when one looks at the other and just sees scary predator instead of person with feelings and needs." "Indeed." The Crown Prince straightened, his massive dignity reasserting itself, though his eyes remained softer than before. "Perhaps we should begin these negotiations anew, with fewer assumptions." And so, in a historic reversal unprecedented in galactic diplomacy, the Draconis hierarchy and Earth's delegation spent the next hour drafting not terms of surrender, but a mutual friendship accord. The dragons, it turned out, had been equally terrified of humans, beings who, despite their physical frailty, had managed to survive in a galaxy of predators through sheer adaptability and technological innovation. What the Draconis had interpreted as aggressive expansion, humans had seen as desperate attempts to establish secure colonies before their homeworld's resources depleted. "You know, you could have just asked for trade agreements instead of planning to annihilate us," Marjorie pointed out, having recovered her diplomatic composure along with her ability to breathe. "Asking implies vulnerability," explained the sapphire-eyed dragon, who had introduced himself as Lord Azarath, Minister of Interspecies Relations. "The Draconis do not show vulnerability, except when getting their nuzzle point scratched, apparently," muttered Gex, who had been drowning his lingering adrenaline in the embassy's complimentary refreshments. "We call them Jalixan, sacred touch receptors," corrected Azarath, his scales flushing a slightly embarrassed purple. "And they are typically only exposed to clutchmates and life-bonded pairs." "Sorry about that," Cassidy said. "I didn't know it was so personal. On Earth, reptiles are usually okay with trusted handlers touching their sensitive spots, once they know you're not a threat. The violation of protocol would normally result in immediate incineration," Vexillahur noted casually. "But, as it led to this unexpected outcome, we shall consider it a fortunate cultural misunderstanding." By the time the formal accord was signed, Cassidy's signature appearing alongside Vexillahur's claw print on the historic document, Earth had been officially designated as scale kin, a status previously reserved for only 3 other species in the known galaxy. The classification came with significant benefits: protection from other predatory empires, access to Draconis trade routes, and invitation to the bicentennial scale polishing festival. A cultural event of such significance that even mentioning it to non-scale kin had previously been punishable by exile. As the delegation prepared to return to Earth, carrying news that would fundamentally alter humanity's place in the galactic community, Vexillahur requested a private audience with Cassidy. "Your insight is unusual, young human," the Crown Prince said when they were alone in a smaller chamber off the main hall. "In 12,000 years of conquest, no being has ever recognized a dragon's fear." "Most people don't recognize it in Earth reptiles either," Cassidy admitted. "They just see the threat display and panic. But if you work with them enough, you start to see past the scary parts to what they're really saying." "And what are we really saying, in your estimation?" Cassidy considered this. "I think you're saying the same thing most creatures say. See me, respect me, don't hurt me. The only difference is, you have fusion breath to make sure others listen." Vexillahur made a sound that might have been a chuckle. "Perceptive, the Void Vlog Supreme, our most prominent cultural influencer, has already begun streaming commentary on your diplomatic approach. It has been viewed by 17 billion beings across 9 galaxies. The phrase, 'Don't be scared, Big Lizard,' is trending on all major consciousness networks. Oh God, Cassidy covered her face. I'm going to be a galactic meme, aren't I? Indeed. But perhaps a useful one. The dragon's enormous eyes studied her with newfound respect. We have long believed that fear was necessary for respect. You have demonstrated an alternative approach. Just basic reptile handling, Cassidy said with a shrug. Show them you're not a threat, respect their space, and don't take it personally when they try to bite your face off. Words to live by, agreed Vexilahur solemnly. The Draconis will remember them. And you, Cassidy Chen of Earth. When Cassidy finally returned to her family's reptile rehabilitation center in Nebraska, she found it surrounded by news drones, diplomatic security, and a small contingent of dragon cultural attachés who had requested permission to observe the human hatchling's methodology. Her parents, initially bewildered by their daughter's sudden diplomatic fame, adapted with remarkable speed, expanding their facility to include a Galactic Reptilian Psychology wing, funded by a generous grant from the Draconis Educational Trust. As for Cassidy herself, she continued doing what she had always done, helping scared creatures feel less afraid, one gentle touch at a time. If some of those creatures now happened to be 20-ton interstellar conquerors with fusion breath and complex cultural traditions around scale maintenance, well, that was just an interesting career development. Across the stars, diplomatic protocols were hastily being rewritten. Species that had lived in terror of draconian conquest for millennia cautiously began reaching out with their own diplomatic overtures, many specifically requesting the human approach to negotiations. The Void Vlog Supreme's documentary series, Hugging the Monster, the Cassidy Chen Method, broke viewership records across 12 dimensions. And in the grand throne room of Draunus Prime, Crown Prince Vexilahur added a new trophy to his collection of conquered worlds and subjugated species. A simple framed photograph showing a teenage girl with a crocodile, beneath which were written the words that had changed galactic history. Don't be scared, big lizard. I just want to hug you.